Welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched and commented on last week's episode of the show on Springbank, and there was quite a fair few of you that watched it, which is nice. So if you're kind of like a new viewer that's only just started watching my humble show because of that, then thank you for returning, and obviously if you've been with me for a considerable amount of time, then yeah, as per usual, a big thank you for your continued support. It's always appreciated. So hopefully I will continue to entertain you as we're now into, what was it, week 9 of lockdown. Hopefully you've not all gone too stir crazy. I thought for today's episode of the show we'd do something a little bit different. Some of the samples are samples that were left over from this year's World Whisky Awards, and the other two were, I think I tasted for the Whisky magazine, a number of years ago now, but we'll obviously get to those in due course. This week I've titled the show C.R.W. Now normally I don't come up with a title until I'm actually editing the show, and sometimes it's actually the hardest bit, would you believe, was actually coming up with a witty title for the show. But today, no, I've come up with a title well beforehand, and although it sounds like an acronym for a car, it actually stands for corn, rye and wheat, which is what today's episode of the show is about. And I thought it's about time that I looked at sort of, some stuff that I've not looked at before, or certainly not shared with you guys. I mean, obviously I've tasted it before, I thought, yeah, let's look at these three grains, and I've chosen a selection, 2 of each type, although the corn whiskies are not 100% corn, but they'll do. They're labelled as corn whiskies, so I think that's fair enough. And I mean, the thing is, as we know about 100% corn whiskies, they can be a little bit simplistic. Certainly if they've got no age statement and are quite young, they tend to be a little bit straightforward. So the use of other grains tends to sort of like add a little bit more character. Obviously the barley tends to be more there for kick-starting the fermentation rather than adding any huge amount of barley character, but it obviously will add some element to the final spirit. But anyway, so as you can see, number of different distilleries. I'm not going to go into too much detail about all of them. You can find out obviously information on the individual distilleries on the various websites. So we're looking at a bottling from the Spirit of Hven, which is a distillery, I believe, that was founded in 2008 on the island of Hven, surprisingly, which is apparently in the Strait of Øresund, between Sweden and Denmark. And I've come across a couple of their whiskies before, and yeah, I must admit that I've not tasted a poor one from them. That's because I've not tasted too many, so it's kind of swings and roundabouts, I suppose. We're also going to be looking at an Australian distillery that I've not come across before, called the Whippersnapper Distillery, which was based in Perth. Can't remember when it was founded, but certainly they brought on board as an advisor a well-known person of the whisky industry, one Frank McHardy, obviously ex of Springbank. I think I met him once. Nice guy. Obviously incredibly knowledgeable, and so one imagines that bringing on somebody of that ilk as an advisor, I would imagine has resulted in a quality product. Obviously until we taste it we won't know. And then I'm going to be looking at 2 German wheat whiskies now. Yeah, interesting, and obviously explain more about them when I get to them. But the distillery is, or the company is called Finch Schwabischer. It was founded in 1999 by a chap called Hans Gerhard Finch, who owned a 400 hectare farm in the Swabian Jura. Now, I must admit, geography is not my strong point, so I don't know whereabouts in Germany that is, but it's somewhere in Germany. And I'd love to tell you lots about the distillery, but the website's in German. I ran a few things through the translator, and apparently I think something got lost somewhere in the translation, but apparently Hans was originally fascinated by fruit fermentation, and it said he was infected with the Snaps distillery virus. Oh well, I think I'd rather be infected by that virus than COVID-19, I think. Like I say, I think something probably lost in the translation there. Then I'm going to be looking at two American distilleries, Skip Rock Distillers, which is was founded in 2009 in Washington State, I believe in the town of Sonamish. That's a bit of a gold pool, isn't it? Anyway, so I'm looking at one of their ryes. Don't know whether it's 100% rye or not, because I couldn't find out that information, but I suppose it really matters at the end of the day. And of course we'll be looking at a bottle of Michters. Yes, I thought I'd annoy you by saying Michters when yes, I know it's Michters. I know, I got all that last time. You Americans and your pronunciation, you're as bad as the rest of the world. Anyway, no. So I'll be looking at a bottle of their rye, which I just happened to have. So I thought, well, why not? So anyway, that's, like I said, it's a brief rundown of the distilleries I'll be looking at. So let's have a look at today's lineup. Right, okay, so we're going to be kicking off with the... Oh, hang on, I haven't actually poured it out of the bottle yet. Oh, I'm not going to get very far until I do that. Anyway, I'll do that in between. So this is the Spirit of Hven, MerCurious Swedish corn whisky, bottled at 45.6%. It is... all made from, well, I believe Swedish. Well, it says Swedish corn. Don't know about the rye and the wheat component, but it's 88% Swedish corn, 5% wheat, and 3.5% rye, aged in American virgin oak. The second corn whisky we'll be looking at is from Whippersnapper. It's called Upshot Cask Strength, 64%. Oh, yes. Have butt of water ready for that one. It's apparently 80% West Australian corn, 10% barley, and 10% wheat. So yeah, could be interesting. And like I said, Frank McHardy is the advisor, or has been the advisor to the distillery. So I'm expecting it to be a quality product. The next two bottlings are the two Finch Schwabischer bottlings. Now these on paper, well, because I haven't tasted them yet, on paper sound really intriguing. So I'm not entirely sure whether it's 100% wheat or not, so I shall labour under that assumption. This is the Barrique R19, bottled at 50%. Bit of a gold pool. Apparently it's spent 8 years maturing in ex-red wine barriques, so interesting. And the second bottling is called the Barrel Proof 19, also bottled at 50%, although I don't know whether that is indeed the actual strength that came out of the cask, or whether they like to use 50% and have watered it down and just called it barrel strength. Again, I honestly don't know. So this is quite intriguing because it's made up of three distinct components. The first is 5 years aged in ex-bourbon, finished in port. Don't know how long for. Batch 2 is 8-year-old wheat matured in red wine barriques. So pretty much the so what we're looking at is a component and the finished article, for want of a better word. And the third component of the barrel proof bottling spends 8 years old. Spends 8 years in ex-bourbon barrels. So yeah, that again could be interesting. It'll be the thing is, I often find, as I probably mentioned when I did the episode on the French blended whiskies, I often find European whiskies just tend to be bottled far too young, and they're all a bit too fainty and a bit too raw. So it'll be interesting because this has some age to it, you know. So that will be interesting. Next, the second to last bottling we'll be looking at is the Skip Rock Rye. Like I said, this was bottled in 2018. 2015, sorry, and bottled at 43%. Don't know if it's actually available in the UK. I couldn't find any of it, and as you can see from the picture of the bottle on the page, I had to take it off their website, and being American, it's bottled at 75 cl, which is why it looks a little bit larger than the other ones. So just wanted to point that out, just in case you thought I made a mistake. And the Michters. So this is the US #1 barrel strength rye, bottle of 54%, cask number L15E495, and like I said, this was bottled in 2015, so yes, a little while ago, but should be fine. Anyway, I better pour some in the glasses now. Right, okay, so juice in the glass. Let's have a look at the MerCurious then. Pungent. Oh, it's got a lovely spiciness. The rye really is coming through quite powerfully, kicking above its percentage. I mean, it's got some lovely fragrant corn. I'm certainly getting a lot of grippy but fresh oak. It's got a lovely esteriness. It's definitely got a very American character to it, it has to be said. But then you know, it's virgin American oak, and I mean, that is lovely. I mean, that is an absolutely beautiful nose. I mean, like I said, it's got. I'm not getting a huge amount of the wheat. It has to be said. I mean, it is more kind of, to me, feels more corn and rye like. But yeah, that's really pleasant. See what the pulse like. Plenty of corn on the palate. It's got that slight burnt caramel note, but there's some nice sweeter corn notes to offset that. Touch of vanilla. It's not quite as complex, I feel, as the nose would lead you suggest. The rye is is less noticeable. It's a little bit more muted. There's a little bit of spice coming through on the finish. I mean, it's still a quality whiskey. It's lovely. I don't think it's particularly expensive. I think it's you know who have got it at sub 50 quid, and you know, I'm not going to disagree with that. I think it's got enough complexity to warrant being sold at that kind of price, and I think it's really, really nice. That's a lovely whiskey. Right, so let's move on to the Upshot. I mean, really, look at the colour of that. I mean, you know, if I didn't know anything about that, I mean, I'd be saying, oh, got to be a sherry cask or something like that. But that colour, but I don't believe it is. I'm assuming it's American oak aged. Let's see when those goes. Oh, that's earthy, raw, pungent, loads of dark spice. God, it's not a soft and fluffy corn whiskey, I can tell you that. I mean, that has got some real, you know what. And I'm getting a lot of wheat, in actual fact. I'm getting that sort of wheat flake, dark, toasted, licorice, oiliness, and there's an almost rye-like spice as well. I mean, if I was nosing this completely blind, I would have said that this was, you know, predominantly rye and with a bit of wheat and some corn, because yeah, I'm getting the corn slightly at the edges. I mean, you know, it really is quite intense, it has to be said. Yeah, there's some rough edges, but you know what, I mean, it's intriguing. Let's see what the palate like. Again, that's an intense animal. It's young. It's not fainty. There's an oiliness on the finish. I mean, it's masked by its alcohol. Again, I'm getting a lot of wheat flakes, a little bit of spice, a little bit of corn, but it really is quite raw, quite oily, quite young, but not fainty. Certainly the spirit certainly seemed really clean, and that really does need a little drop of water, it has to be said. That is seriously intense, as you would expect. So let's see what a little drop of water does to it. Do you know, I'm now getting some sweeter fruit notes. I'm getting some raspberry, strawberry. Maybe there is a little bit, maybe there's a bit of a wine cask in here, possibly. Again, it's still a bit raw, it's still a bit edgy, it's still a little bit rough. But you know, I think it's got enough balance. I think there's you know, a little bit of sweetness there. Let's see what that's like. There is a bit of faintiness now kind of coming through now. It's been diluted a little bit. It's still raw, it's oily, it's young. It's interesting. I think it needs a little bit of balancing sweetness on the palate, certainly when you add a little drop of water with it, because it becomes quite herbal, quite bitter. I mean, you've got to love the intensity of it. I mean, you know, that without a shadow of a doubt. But I think a little bit more balancing sweetness, maybe a little bit more time in the oak. I don't know. It certainly doesn't seem like it's particularly old. Like I said, it's got that sort of youthful, slightly fainty character. So I think maybe a little bit longer in the cask would just sort of give it a little bit more balance. But either way, I mean, that's impressive spirit, as we say. I'm a victim of your love. Right, okay, so let's take a look at the first of the two German wheat whiskies. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Dark, toasty, wheaty, treacle, cinnamon, marzipan. It's a bit of it's an oiliness, and I want to say sunflower oil because that's kind of the closest I can get to it. There's some dried fruits. It's got a kind of column still kind of feel to it. I don't know what type of still the distillery uses, but it certainly feels like it's got that slight column still dried fruit character. It might be dried fruit coming from the cask possibly, rather than the actual still. And you know what, it's not too raw. It feels like it's been bottled at the right time, and I think that's high praise for a European whisky, it has to be said. Yeah, that's interesting. Let's see what the palate like. Again, I'm getting a lot of column still character. I'm getting that sort of grainy dried fruits, a little bit of wheat flakes, a little bit of spice. It's maybe not quite so intense. It's softer. It's still oily. Yeah, I think it's an interesting whisky. It's certainly different. It's certainly not like an American wheat whisky, to say the least. It certainly feels European. Maybe that is because of the Barrique usage, and it's got a nice grippiness. There's a nice tannic structure to the palate. So yeah, I think overall not too shabby. Okay, so moving on to the barrel proof. So this is kind of like, you know, that was kind of almost like a component, shall we say, but interesting component nevertheless. Let's see what this one's like. It feels a touch younger. It's a little rawness to it. It's more wheat I'm getting. Obviously, there's some more vanilla oak. I can pick up the Barrique character as I tasted that first. It's got a herbalness. It's got again a slight column still kind of note to it. It's almost a little bit of a meatiness as well. This is quite a robust nose. It's got some pleasant weight. And again, like I said, it doesn't come across like an American wheat whiskey. It's got a style of its own, which is what you want at the end of the day, isn't it? So we'll pass on. You know what, that is quite a lovely palate. It's a little raw, yes. It's a little fainty, yes. But I'm getting a lot more wheat character. Oily wheat, bran flakes, a little bit of spice, a little bit of obvious red wine spiciness, a little bit of bitter oak. Again, I'm getting that column still kind of dried fruit character. It's got a lovely spicy finish. The red fruits are lingering, along with a little bit of treacle and dark, almost rye-like notes as well. That spice is very much rye-like to me, and maybe there is a touch of rye in there. I don't honestly know. It certainly comes across like that. So yeah, I think that's really intriguing, really interesting, and like I said, it doesn't taste like an American wheat whiskey. It has a character of its own, and like I said, what more could you want? Right, okay, so let's move on to the Skip Rock Distillers Rye. So 43%, let's see what those good is on this end, shall we? Ooh, that's youthful. Just getting, I wouldn't quite say faintiness, but I'm certainly getting off the still notes coming at me. Earthy, edgy, oily rye, touch of darker rye, treacle, balsamic vinegar, dark chocolate, herbs, again slight smoked meat character, little bit of sweet vanilla in the background, and vanilla just starting to come through. No, I think that's pretty good rye in actual fact. I mean, there's a lot going on there, considering it feels pretty young. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if it was bottled in 2015, it can't physically be any older than 6. And I would say it's probably more likely to be between sort of 3 and 5, I would have thought. But you know, it's got character. You know, and what more could you want? It's got a pleasant, youthful, raw, intense character. It has to be said. Let's see what the palate's like. Young, oily, dry, quite herbal. More herbal rye than spicy rye. Little bit of oak, not a great deal of oak, so you are getting sort of plenty of the spirit character. The oak is just adding a little bit of support. I don't think the palate is quite up to the nose complexity wise. I think this is that the palate is kind of showing its limitations with regards to age. I would like to have seen a little bit more oak character. It's a little short. I think a bit more time in the wood would have sort of added a little bit more vanillins, just taken away some of that slight edginess. But I think that, you know, on this tasting, I think the quality of the spirit is pretty damn good. Bottled a bit too soon, I think, but you know, shows a lot of promise, and I'd like to see that with a little bit more age to it, and I think that would be really very good. And finally, we'll finish with the Michters. Anyway, let's just see what the nose gives us. Oh, that's a lovely nose. It's, oh look, it's a buddy cat. Are you going to, yes. Anyway, taut, spicy, intense rye, cinnamon, clove, orange conserve, touch of manure, some violets. I mean, oh, this is, elegant, intense. You know, this is impressive spirit. I mean, I don't know whether their actual distillery is up and running as yet. I assume it probably is, but this is obviously sourced spirit. Now I'm getting the corn coming through. There's obviously a little bit of corn, I would guess, or maybe that's my imagination. There's certainly some slight banana in this, a touch of toffee, with the toffee's obviously coming from the oak. A little bit of apricot. I mean, that is just sensational spirit. I mean, you know, I don't care where the hell it came from. You know, it is just absolutely stunning. Really earthy. Getting a bit of dark chocolate as well now. Anyway, I'm going to taste it. It's got some lovely maturity. Honey, dark honey, treacle, toffee, wonderfully spicy rye, but it's balanced, and it's balanced by the sweetness of the oak. There's some dark chocolate, some cocoa, mocha, coffee. Oh, damn, that is good. That is amazing spirit, it has to be said. I don't know how much the barrel strength that rye tends to retail for, but I'm guessing it ain't cheap. Well, certainly not over here anyway. But it is stunning. I mean, you know, like I said, wherever the hell they get that spirit from, I don't care. I mean, that's just bloody good spirit. That's all I can say. And yeah, lovely way to finish. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. Come here. Come here. Oi, out of the way. Putty cats. Anyway, where was it? So, Spirit of Hven. Yeah, lovely corn whiskey. You know, it was very American in style, but then that's not a surprise. You know, virgin American oak, lots of corn, and I liked the nose. The nose I thought was really impressive. I liked the sort of the way that the rye punched above its weight, and I thought that was really balanced. Palate, yeah, okay, maybe not quite up to the nose, but certainly not a bad whiskey at all. The Upshot, raw, intense, alcoholic. I think I wouldn't say that sort of putting some water with it kind of showed its limitations. Well, maybe it did on the palate, and I think it probably needs a little bit more time in the oak. But you can't sort of, like, you know, not love that youthful intensity, the rawness. You know, it really was. It's an impressive spirit, and I'd like to sort of see that with a little bit more age under its belt. Well, we shall see, I suppose. The Finch Schwabischer, great. I really like this whiskey, and the reason I love this whiskey is because it isn't raw, young, and, well, it is a bit young, but it's not fitting in the typical kind of style of European whiskies being bottled far too young. It has enough of a maturity. I mean, certainly the Barrique was probably more governed by its cask than the wheat, but I still think pretty balanced. And the thing is, sometimes when you taste like a single barrel bourbon or something like that, you're tasting a component, and sometimes they feel like a component. And I don't quite get that with this one. It does feel like it stands up on its on 2 feet, so to speak. I think the barrel proof bottling was probably the more interesting because of the use of the different blends. It certainly kind of like wasn't quite so Barrique centered. And it certainly seemed to sort of allow the wheat character to come through a little bit more. So yeah, I must admit, I mean, when I tasted these for the World Whisky Awards, like I said, you were always a bit sort of like, funky European whiskies, here we go. But I think I gave the Barrique R an 8 and the barrel proof an 8.4, which I think is pretty damn good scores out of 10 for European whiskies. The Skip Rock, again, I think sort of like interesting. I would like to see a little bit more age to it. I think sort of like putting a little drop of water made it feel a little bit younger, and showed up, I wouldn't quite say its limitations, but it kind of like, it's almost kind of saying, look, this is where it's at the moment. I don't know how much that would cost. Must admit I didn't really look it up. And if it wasn't ridiculously expensive, then I would say, yeah, it's worth having a look at if you're sort of that way inclined. If you're asking to fork out 100 odd quid for it, then no, there's far more complex whiskies for that sort of kind of money. And the Michters, just goes to show they are getting hold of some bloody good spirit at the end of the day. Whether you sort of like feel a bit cheated that they're bottling somebody else's spirit under their own label, I'm guessing like a lot of you in the States, like I said, have said on numerous occasions, it's very much de rigueur for distilleries to do this kind of thing in the States, less in the UK and sort of Europe. So there tends to be a slight sort of divide in opinion to a certain extent. But like I said, as far as I'm concerned, what really matters is the juice. Is the juice good? And the juice is damn good. So, that's a big thumbs up. So anyway, that's this week's episode of the show. I hope you found it interesting. I certainly have found it interesting. I mean, I thought these were all really intriguing whiskies in their own right. And yeah, well, if it means you go out and buy some of them, then brilliant. Then certainly worth looking into. Anyway, until next week, all that's left to say is good dramming and good afternoon, and no booty cat.